Hello, everyone, and welcome to your 2023 year ahead horoscope for Leo rising. If you're a Leo sun, of course, you can watch this video, but it might make a little bit more sense if you watch it from your rising sign. In this video, we're going to be covering first just the major transits of the year, and then I'm going to be going into advice for Leo risings, mindsets to have to make sure you have a successful year. And then we're going to be going over the transits month by month. So make sure you like this video so you can come back to it throughout the year and see if any of the predictions are right as well. Let me know in the comments below what months you're looking forward to the most, what transits you're not looking forward to, and let me know if anything is lining up here with plans that you already kind of have that you're kind of going into 2023 with. So with that being said, let's go ahead and pull up this. So the other thing I want to say too is, well, let's just go into this first. Okay, so I've said this before, the major transits this year are in March. March has a lot going on. And the first thing is Saturn is going into Pisces. This is going to be a new 3-year long transit. Saturn's been in Aquarius for the past 2.5 years, and we'll talk about that. Pluto goes into Aquarius this year. That's going to be a 20-year long transit, and I have a whole podcast about this on my podcast called The Delineation, where I go into that much more deeper. The other thing I wanted to say was, this is a 2-part video. I made a video that just goes over the transits of 2023, and I go over the transits in detail. And so make sure you watch that video, and you can come back to this video because this video is much more descriptive of how it's specifically going to be affecting you. But anyway, March is really the big month. A lot changes in the world in March. Another thing we have going on is Jupiter going into Taurus. It's going to be fucking awesome for you Leo risings out there. I'm really looking forward to it for you guys. The North Node is going to go into Aries, and the South Node is going to go into Libra. That is also a really big deal for you guys. I think it's going to be really good. This actually looks like I don't want to say an amazing year, but this year for the Leo risings is better than the past couple years. That is for sure. And then, of course, we have the Venus retrograde in Leo. This is for you guys. Like, this Venus retrograde in Leo is for the Leo risings out there. And honestly, this Venus retrograde, some people get really scared of Venus retrograde. I think this one's actually going to be really good, and I'll explain why. So, major advice for the Leo risings. Be hot and be sexy. I swear to God, if you are feeling like a broke, ugly-ass bitch, this is not the year for that. You have to get rid of that, even if it's just faking it till you make it. This year is about, being hot. I know that sounds funny, but I'm being dead ass right now. A lot of this year has to do with your identity and visibility. Learning and traveling, getting educated, getting into your spirituality. A lot of this year has to deal with growth, spirituality, traveling, education. And so leaning into that, I think, will be really good for you guys this year. There's a ton of expansion in work and career, again, with a lot of focus on travel. So I think, in order to leverage some of the growth that you're going to be experiencing in your career, maybe you need to learn more things. Maybe you need to take some courses or classes or learn something this year is what I'm trying to say. And changing your appearance. This is a big year about changing your appearance, which I know sounds funny, but I'll be able to go into it as we go along. So let's start. January. The major 2 things that we're having in January is Mars stationing direct and Mercury stationing direct. But before I get into that, I want to show you guys something real quick. So, oh, there we go. I was like, what happened here? Okay. So let's go ahead and look at January 1st, 2023. So the big thing here, this is Cancer rising, my bad. Let's do Leo rising. Okay, so the big thing here is Jupiter ingresses back into Aries. So Jupiter originally ingressed into Aries somewhere around May of 2022, and Jupiter was in Aries from May, June, July, August, September, and October. And so we got a little bit of a preview of what 2023 has to offer. Jupiter's about expansion, opportunities, gifts, abundance, and it's been in your 9th house of far distance and foreign travel, higher education, spirituality, publishing, broadcasting, social media. So there might have been a lot of expansion in that area, and it kind of went backwards around October, November of 2022. But when we start 2023, this area gets uplifted again. And so there's going to be a lot of focus on, again, school, higher education, travel, spirituality. Jupiter rules your 8th house of the occult and secrets and other people's money and shared resources. So something about shared resources is getting involved with traveling or learning. Jupiter also rules your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, arts, music, recreation, children, and that's going into the 9th house too. So there's something, creative that is going into a flow with your spirituality and, publishing and putting yourself out there. So we're starting the year with Jupiter going into Aries, but coming back to this, the first 2 big transits that we have is Mars is stationing direct. Mars has been retrograde in your 11th house of community, networks, and friends for a couple months now. Mars has been in Gemini since August, September, October, November, December. Now January, Mars finally stations direct. So there might have been some conflicts and some fights and some going back and forth with drama with friends. That all finally starts to like work itself out. You're not done with it yet, but like maybe you were hanging out with a bunch of friends at first and then you kind of like, I don't want to say regressed, but you stopped maybe hanging out with some people or some things kind of got confusing. You will feel much more clear about what you're doing with your friendships on January 12th. Then after that, we have Mercury stationing direct. Mercury is going to be going retrograde pretty much right about New Year's Eve. And so Mercury is going to be retrograding in your 6th house of work, labor, routine, health, habits, pets, coworkers, employees. So there might have been a miscommunication with a coworker or an employee or a change in your schedule. Maybe a health thing came up. Mercury stationing direct by the 18th is when all of that clears up. And what I want to talk about with this is that the beginning of the year is not going to feel that big of a push forward. Like if you're expecting New Year's Eve to be like, I'm ready, I'm going to go, and I'm going to have a great year, I feel like that energy is really not going to come into play until the end of January. So give yourself a little bit of time to get, into the swing of things. But it's really not until Mercury stations direct and Mars stations direct like that things move forward, right? Mars is the planet of energy, action, drive, and we want it to be moving forward so we can feel ambitious. And Mercury is in the sign of Capricorn. We're talking about plans, work, efficiency. And once Mercury stations direct, I think that's when a lot more of the plans and everything start, going much more your way. I have to turn this off real quick. There we go. Okay, so after that, we get to February. And in February is the quietest month of this year. The only thing that's really going on is Mercury leaves shadow. That's going to be on the 7th. So again, where this miscommunication or this delay occurred with your 6th house, so work, labor, routine, health, habits, pets, coworkers, that all gets cleared up by the 7th. So whatever ends up starting around the middle of December and goes back and forth from December and January all starts to move forward in February. And that's pretty much all that's going on in February. But February is like the quiet before the storm because March has a lot of things going on for it. The first thing that we have going is Venus conjoining Jupiter in Aries. This is happening on the 2nd. This is, of course, happening in your 9th house of spirituality, religion, far distance travel, higher education, publishing, media. And so this is a good transit. I really do like this transit. For everybody, yes, for the Leo risings, it'll be really good too. There's a stipulation on it, though. There's something about it that might feel weird. Hold on, let me get to it here. And the biggest thing to really talk about is, again, Jupiter is flying through your 9th house of spirituality, religion. There's all this expansion there. But Venus, she rules your 10th house of your career and your 3rd house of like communication, technology, siblings, education, basic education, not higher education. So Venus conjoining Jupiter is like, Venus is all about fun and pleasure, but in Aries, it's like you have to like attack what you want to go and get it. It doesn't just like come naturally to you. And so Venus conjoining Jupiter in the 9th house is some type of expansion with, with your career based off your education or traveling or learning about something. And it's also on Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer. And I like to analogize Chiron as like pouring alcohol in an open wound. It stings, but it's to clean up the wound and to make things heal faster. And so there's something healing that might come with a little bit of a sting when it comes to your 9th house. So this could be about your beliefs about yourself and your worldview. This could be about traveling. This could be about, this could involve work and career stuff, and we'll be going more into that as time goes on. But this is a relatively good transit. I think it's going to be a really good time to, put yourself out there, travel, have fun, especially. Then the next big thing that we have going on is Saturn entering Pisces. This is a really big deal for you guys because Saturn has been in your 7th house of relationships for the past 2.5 years. And I swear to God, all of my Leo rising clients, it's just like you guys are, it's like there's an invisible wall between you and relationships. You've just been chronically single. There's been all of these like weird barriers with relationships. That is finally ending. Saturn is leaving your 7th house, so maybe there'll be much, and I think there's also a lot of you are going to get in relationships this summer. But Saturn is now going to be going into your 8th house of other people's money, death, debt, taxes, the occult, secrets. And Saturn rules things like limitations, boundaries, maturity. And in the sign of Pisces, it has to do with integration and questioning reality and things like that. And it's going into your 8th house. So the thing I don't like about this is Saturn rules your 6th house of like health, habits, work, day-to-day activities, and that's going into the 8th house where that's going to require more like bringing things together. It also rules your 7th house of relationships, and your 7th house ruler is going to be in the 8th house. So you might start dating different people. Your relationships might involve shared resources. Like the 8th house is just other people's money, other people's business. And when your 7th house ruler is there, it's like there's this kind of weird energy where it comes to like your relationships don't not come with the shared resources part. There's something about this limit or this wall or this authority dealing with the access to shared resources, like someone not letting you get what you deserve or someone not sharing with you or something like that. And so it's going to feel a little bit weird, but with Saturn being in your 8th house, there's going to be the sense of like, how do you navigate shared resources when, you know, an authority is in control of it, or when, you know, maybe you're in a relationship, you're more dependent on your partner. Maybe this is when, you know, there might be more restrictions around that shared resource. That's really what this is looking like. But it's also going to be like a lot about mysticism and spirituality and stuff like that. But this is a 3-year-long transit. This is going to be a thing for the next 2.5, 3 years. So just be prepared for that. That changes in March. That's a really big shift that you're going to feel. And then Pluto goes into Aquarius just a little bit later. Again, this is a 20-year-long transit. This is not going to just like automatically change things, but Pluto rules transformation. It rules fear. It rules power. It rules corruption. And it's going into your 7th house of relationships, others, and open enemies, people that are like outward. Like the 7th house is any relationship, whether it's your best, your partner or your worst enemy. So when Pluto goes into your 7th house, that is going to be a big shift in the world, like geopolitical wise. So I would pay attention more to the news for this, not in your personal life. But the biggest thing is when Pluto goes into your 7th house, this is where fear is really going to come into relationships. Pluto in Aquarius is going to be like this fear of abandonment, this fear of separation, this fear of isolation. But Pluto also asks you to transform fear into power. And so this is also going to be a very powerful time for relationships. And I know that sounds corny, but the way I would have you look at this is like, how can you take that energy that you get from relationships that's fearful or scary, and how can you transmute that into some type of form of power? Pluto in Aquarius is there's going to be a lot of power structures and powerful relationships that, you know, really call into question how you interact with people. And again, this is a 20-year-long transit. It's not going to just like be fucking clear overnight what's kind of going on. But over the next 2 decades, you're going to see quite a radical transformation to your relationships. But that would be true for, I guess, like anybody in a 20-year-long thing. But anyway, big transformation coming up to relationships here, mostly around power and fear and corruption too. So just make sure you're aware of who you're doing anything with. But then right after that, a few days after, on March 25th, Mars enters Cancer. This is a big shift, not necessarily for you guys in particular, but just in the world in general, because Mars has been in Gemini for 8 months. So all of August, September, October, November, December, January, February, and pretty much all of March. And then Mars enters your 12th house of isolation, self-sabotage, repressed thoughts and feelings, and hidden enemies. And so the biggest thing with this is when Mars goes into Cancer, you know, it spent all of this time in your 11th house of friends. And so maybe there's a bunch of drama or fighting back and forth with friends, especially related to your living situation. When Mars goes into your 12th house, this is going to be a time of reclusing. This is going to be a time of going away and being more by yourself. Mars rules fights and conflicts, but it's in Cancer, where Cancer is about like nurturing and defending. So Mars has to be much more defensive. Mars might be a little bit more crabby in Cancer, but this is like hiding away, tucking yourself away, doing some healing work. Mars in your 12th house might be a little bit going insane because the 12th house rules like repressed thoughts and the subconscious, and Mars in Cancer is like a little bit of self-sabotage there. But this just seems like a small period of isolation. When Mars goes into Cancer, you know, your bullshit's going to come up and you might feel insecure, and you should probably address that rather than ignore it or do, you know, sabotage behaviors that fuck you over. So that's March. March shows a lot of big shifts. And then we get to April. April's really where things like we have all of these shifts and things just ramp up into the summer really fast. The first thing is the Jupiter cazimi in Aries. And now what a cazimi is when a planet conjoins the sun, or when the sun conjoins a planet, whatever you want to call it. This is happening on the 11th. This is happening in Aries. And this is happening in your 9th house of spirituality, religion, far distance travel. When a planet conjoins the sun, this is resetting that planet's energy. So Jupiter again dipped into your ninth house earlier in 2022. It gave you a little bit of taste of what's to be next. And this is the moment where things really shift over when it comes to, I mean, for one, you're ruled by the sun. So the sun is conjoining Jupiter in the ninth house. And this sounds like a really ambitious new beginning where it comes to either schooling or traveling or learning about yourself or healing of some sort or publishing yourself or the ninth house is this kind of meta house almost in a sense. But this is like a really big new start when it comes to what you're learning, what you're growing into. Also around creativity, sexuality, art, music, self-expression. Eighth house, this is kind of like maybe getting over some fears, really being empowered. This is really good stuff. I really like this Jupiter Cazimi. But what's important about this is like it's like this new opportunity or this new expansion kind of kicks off. But then about a week later on the 19th here, we have our first solar eclipse in Aries. Again, this is in the ninth house, so we're talking about all of these same topics. But what eclipses do, eclipses are like extreme emergency events that kind of call of your attention away. Now, the thing is with this eclipse is this is the first eclipse that we'll have in Aries. However, the North Node, which symbolizes where the eclipses are at, is still in Taurus. So this is simply opening up the gateway for the next year and a half. The nodes switch signs every year and a half, so the next year and a half will be about Aries. But this is the first one. This is an eclipse. This is like all of your attention is being taken away to this ninth house area. Far distance traveling, higher education, spirituality, publishing, lawyers rule the ninth house too. Politicians rule the ninth house too. It's a lot going on there. But there's this eclipse there. This is a solar eclipse. So this is like resetting this area for you and you're heading off in this direction. This is a really powerful time, I think, to really get into your beliefs, really get into publishing, spirituality, all of that stuff. You're going to feel really ramped up around this time. Then literally, 2 days after that, 3 days after that, we have Mercury stationing retrograde. This is also important. It's happening in the sign of Taurus, which rules your 10th house of career, legacy, reputation. And so we have this eclipse and we enter eclipse season. And then all of a sudden, Mercury goes retrograde in your 10th house. It's going to be conjoining Uranus. And so Mercury retrogrades are like delays, miscommunications, re-strategizing, replanning things. You're going to have to go over things a few times. This is in your 10th house of your career. So this might be a change in jobs, a change in schedule, a miscommunication, a delay in work. But it's also on top of Uranus, and Uranus is instability, random events, kind of chaotic. So this kind of is like, maybe some of you are like, I quit my job on accident. Like maybe it slips out or something like that. A lot of you are going to be getting new jobs, and a lot of your work is going to be expanding this year. This is a great year for the Leo risings. Like really, you guys kind of get the best year out of all of the signs, to be honest with you guys. But as Mercury stations retrograde, this is a time of rethinking this whole area. Now, what's important about this is Mercury's going to station retrograde here in Taurus, but it's going to come back here about the early degrees of Taurus. And so what Mercury is doing here as it goes retrograde is it's kind of getting ready for Jupiter to ingress into Taurus. Jupiter's going to ingress into Taurus here in just a second. In fact, we're going to talk about it next, essentially. And so this Mercury retrograde phase is like getting ready for Jupiter to come in. It's like getting your house ready for guests to come in. So let's talk about it. We get to May, we get to Cinco de Mayo here, and we have our last lunar eclipse in Scorpio. So mind you, this is in between eclipses at this point. And for the past year and a half, the eclipses have been in Taurus and Scorpio. We had some pretty gnarly eclipses in April and May of 2022, and we also had some really gnarly eclipses at the end of October, beginning of November of 2022. This is the last round of that. And this is in your 4th house of home, family, living situation, roots, heritage. And what's important about this is the South Node has been going through your 4th house. So there's been this drain or this exhaustion when it comes to family, living situation, parents. It's like Scorpio, it's yucky and gunky. This eclipse is the last clearing out of that. So the analogy I've been using is like when you're moving, for example, and there's a day in the move where you move all of the big stuff, right? That's what the eclipses in 2022 are like. This is like the cleanup before you pack everything up and you lock the door. Wiping the windows down, mopping the floors. This is the last cleanup of your family, your living situation. And just, it's a purging, really, and getting rid of stuff. That's why I'm using that analogy. And it's going to be a little bit brutal. This is out of all of the eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio, this one's the lightest. This is like a diet eclipse. But it is really like, it's kind of like after moving from an apartment that you've loved. It's like, you do all of the big work and you're focused on the work. And then there's that minute where you're kind of cleaning up everything. You kind of get sad that you're like, fuck, I'm leaving. That's what this is. You're moving on to bigger things and you just have to get rid of some shit in order to go in that direction. That's how it goes. So then immediately after that, about a week and a half later, Jupiter enters Taurus. This is where it really kicks into gear for you guys. This is why this year is going to be really good. It rules your Jupiter is going to be going into your 10th house, career, legacy, reputation. Jupiter expands. Jupiter brings opportunities. It's going into the sign of the bull. This is like a lot of like growth and luxuries and abundance and security and stability. So this is looking pretty fucking sweet for you guys, to be honest with you. I have a ton of clients that start, like if you ever wanted to start a business, when Jupiter enters your 10th house, that's the time to start a business. So if you want to do it, this is the year. Jupiter's going to enter your 10th. All of a sudden, there's all this expansion with work, all of this expansion with career, all of this expansion with your reputation. Everything's kind of going your way. Seems pretty good. But then 4 days later on the 20th, we have Mars ingressing into Leo. Now, what's funny about this year is the Mars ingresses are really in particular. But Mars is going to be entering your first house of the self, body, your image, personality, overall life prominence. And what's important about this is like we're about to have a Venus retrograde in Leo, and Mars is going to really activate this Leo thing first. And so when Mars, again, your action, your energy, fights, conflicts, it's in Leo. It's like being proud, being bold, being courageous, being triumphant. And it's in your first house of yourself. So really taking, control of things. It's going to be squaring Jupiter. And it's going to be going opposite Pluto. So there's going to be this shift in your energy of like, you might be a little bit more cocky than normal. You might be a little bit more full of yourself than normal, which I think is totally fine. You're talking to a Leo sun here. But Mars is going to square Jupiter and it's going to go opposite Pluto, where I feel like you are going to be challenging people that are like actively trying to go out of their way to like fuck you over. Like Mars opposite Pluto is kind of like, going against the grain of what, Pluto's in your 7th house of relationships. You have people in your life trying to control, manipulate you. Mars and Leo's like, fuck that. I'm going to do my own thing. And it's squaring Jupiter and Taurus. I think maybe Jupiter going in your 10th house of your career gives you this confidence to go out in your own way and go and do things your own way. This looks awesome. And this is also setting the stage for the Venus retrograde this year. So keep that in mind. This is really important. So then we get to June. And really the first thing in June is Jupiter is going to conjoin Rahu, otherwise known as the North Node. This is happening on June 1st. Again, 10th house stuff. And the big deal with this is the North Node is this all-consuming thing, right? It's this hunger, this urge, this desire, this, hunger that cannot be filled. Or this, hunger that cannot be fed? I don't know what I'm trying to say here. But anyway, you have this symbol that represents like going to extremes, super desire for this area. It's in career, it's in reputation. But then you have the planet of excess and like overdoing things in your 10th house of your career. You guys are going to have like whatever work that you end up doing is going to be a lot. Now that might be good, but it also might be a lot at the same time. You have to be careful what you wish for because you might just get it. And so Jupiter conjoining the North Node in your 10th house is like, things might blow up. And not necessarily blow up, but it's kind of like, maybe when you air up a tire too much with too much air than you were anticipating, things are going to balloon really, really fast. And this is also in Mercury leaf shadow too. So by this point, by the beginning of June, career stuff is really taking off and you're really hyper consuming all of this growth. I think it's really good, but I think it's also just kind of like, hey, know your limits, because this is going to be a really easy time to like take on too many things. Like for example, Jupiter's rules your 8th house of debt and Saturn's in your 8th house of debt. So this is like, don't take on a ridiculous amount of debt for like a business or something like that. Not saying you shouldn't do that, but it's like, just fucking know when it's too much. That's a good thing for Jupiter North Node. Know when it's too much. What is good though is Jupiter will be sextiling Saturn. So there's a lot of supportive energy with all of this. Like this is a really great year for you guys. Speaking of Saturn, the next thing that we have going on here is Saturn is going to station retrograde in Pisces. Again, this is in your 8th house, other people's money, death, taxes, occult. So the biggest thing is as Saturn is moving forward, I'm going to use the same analogy that I've been using for everybody, but Saturn moving forward is like getting, more responsibility, gaining more authority, gaining more control over what you do. It's kind of like getting a management position. You're like, cool, I'm the boss, I make the rules, blah, blah, blah. But then Saturn station's retrograde. And that's where the problems come in, where it's like, okay, 5 minutes ago, it was really fun to be the authority, but now you have to deal with problems of being the authority. You know, problems are everywhere. And so this is going to be the learning curve. This is going to be the discipline curve where you really have to grow up and mature into new things. And that's going to be around shared resources, other people's money, and especially with relationships. I mean, this is your 7th house ruler of marriage and relationships in the 8th house of other people's money retrograde. This is going to be like really having to navigate, you know, boundaries around other people's money, other people's resources, how you connect to people and what is your business and what is their business. And this is where you just kind of have to do some growing up around this area. So it's like you got all this new, you know, control and authority, and now it's time to actually be like disciplined about it. So that starts on the 18th. And then, as you guys probably saw in that reel, Venus enters shadow. Venus has already been in Leo at this point, but she doesn't enter shadow until June 19th. Again, Venus is in your 1st house, the self, body, image, personality. I mean, it is a hot girl summer for the Leo risings. I'm not kidding. Venus is going to be in Leo for 5 months. So from June, July, August, September, and October. That's 5 months of Venus being in your 1st house. That's really, really as good as it gets. While Jupiter's also in your 10th house, kind of doesn't really get better, to be honest with you. It really doesn't. But Venus enters shadow on June 19th. And what's important about this is Venus rules your 10th house of your career and your reputation. It also rules your 3rd house of siblings, neighbors, communication, tools. And the thing is, Venus is an evening star at this point. So evening star Venus is very receptive. Things just come to evening star Venus. And Venus in Leo is very like, look at me. It's like getting a lot of attention, right? Venus is fun and pleasure and connection. In Leo, it's very like, you know, limelight. It's very center of attention. And so you might be receiving some attention, but there's going to be something that happens here on the 19th where what you are receiving, something comes into challenge here. When Venus goes retrograde, there's going to be this value shift, and there's going to be a whole change in how you look, how you put yourself out there. And I feel like there's going to be some attention that you're receiving at this time that you don't like, or that you understand you need to change your mindset about. Jupiter, the planet of like philosophy and beliefs, is also in Venus's house. So there's a lot of focus on the Venus stuff in your life. Beauty, value, you know, career, legacy, fun, and enjoyment. But what's important about June 19th is there's something that's going to happen on this day that you're going to come back to here in a couple months, and I'm going to explain. So we get to July, Mars enters Virgo. The only reason this is important is because here, by the time we get to August, there'll be a Mercury retrograde here, and Mars is fights and conflicts and problems. And so Mars going into Virgo will cause the problems. Mars is, you know, again, burning things, cutting, separating, and it's going into your 2nd house of money, finances, possessions. So this is going to be easy to burn through cash. Mars is in Virgo, so I think you're going to try to be really organized about your assets, your money, how you spend your money. But that Mars in Virgo meticulousness might be kind of like, you might be like, oh, well, I need this and I might need that. And so it's just going to be really easy to burn through cash as Mars enters Virgo. Whoops. So Mars enters Virgo. Venus is in shadow at this point. It's really hot girl summer for you up until like Mars enters. Well, it's going to be actually like that for a while. But Mars enters Virgo, and it becomes much more about money at this time and spending it, organizing it. What are you doing with it? But then we get to the 18th here, and that is when the North Node and the South Node enter Aries and Libra. So this is activating your 9th house and your 3rd house. So the North Node is going to be entering your 9th house. So there's going to be this hyperfixation and this pull towards spirituality, religion, far distance travel, higher education, publishing. And this is the North Node in Aries. This is very like, I'm going to just do it. Like I'm just going to fucking do it and go for it. But the 3rd house rules communication, technology, short distance travel. It also rules siblings and people that are around you. It rules how you utilize the knowledge that you have. And that's the South Node. So in order to do the North Node thing where you really want to learn and travel and grow, the South Node is like, well, you have to get rid of this at the cost of this. The South Node is this drain and this purging of things. And it's in Libra. So balance, relationships, and this is going into your 3rd house of, you know, people around you, short distance travel, communication. There's going to be this kind of purge in the way that you used to do things. Like the 3rd house is still like how you do things. but the ninth house is like learning from, outwardly worldly experiences. So you're really going to be in a phase of relearning things this year. It's a big year for you guys. I can't emphasize that enough. So the node switch signs, that's going to be a really big deal. It will be like, I need to learn, I need to grow, I need to go in this way, and I need to unlearn everything that I have been doing. And then right after that, about 4 days later, on the 22nd, Venus stations retrograde in Leo. This is happening in your first house. Again, self, body, image. This is what I was talking about, where it's like, this is where it's time to be a new you. This is a year to be hot and sexy. Venus retrograding in your first house. Change your looks, change your identity. It's your 10th house ruler of your career. So a lot of your career is going to be tied with your identity. This is also your third house ruler. So how you express yourself, how you communicate things, even siblings and the South Node is here. So you're just going to be relearning a lot of yourself, in my opinion. Like, it's like, you're going to be like, whoa, I want to grow into this. Whoa, I want to do this. So I need to change my whole identity. And then there's this period of like relearning that. It looks really fun. And so the other thing I wanted to bring up is Venus goes retrograde every 8 years in the same sign. So I want you to think about what was going on in summer of 2015 for you guys, because whatever was going on in summer of 2015, you're going to come back to here this summer. It's going to be a lot of fun, in my opinion. Now, the other thing I would bring up too is Jupiter is in Taurus. It's in Venus' sign. So you're evaluating, you are questioning, you have a lot of faith and hope and opportunity when it comes to value and career. But as Venus retrogrades, it's like you see this opportunity and you have to make these changes about yourself, about your body, your image, how you view your identity. And also the way that you're witnessed, the way that you're seen. Like the 10th house is a very public-facing house, and the first house is literally how you look. So like how people recognize you is also changing during this time. We get to August, and really it's like 2.5 weeks later is when we get the halfway point and we get the Venus Cazimi. It's happening on the 13th. Again, still in the first house. This is the halfway point of the Venus retrograde. And so the biggest thing here is like Venus stations retrograde, and you start to undergo this value shift where it's like, again, evening star Venus is like, I'm getting all of this attention, I'm receiving all of these looks. And then Venus goes retrograde where something about the way that you're receiving attention is changing. Like your value to that or your relationship to that is changing. And then you undergo this change, and it's not till August 13th where we get this Venus Cazimi, and this is the halfway point. And this is when it's like that, again, a planet when it goes Cazimi is restarting, it's changing its phase. So this is your 10th house ruler of career and your 3rd house ruler of short distance travel, communication, siblings. There's some literal change that's going on here, a dying of the old and a beginning of the new. Venus is going from the evening star to the morning star. And so this is also going to be squaring Uranus. It's going to be a little unstable. It's going to be all over the place, but it's for the best. It's not really that bad. Then about a week and a couple days later, Mercury will station retrograde in Virgo. This is where the money stuff comes in for you guys. So while all this career stuff is happening, you have a lot of changes going on with your money. Again, second house of money and finances. What's interesting about this is Mars is right here with Mercury. So as we move forward, Mars is burning through cash. Maybe you're spending a lot more money than usual. Maybe you're trying to be more organized about your money. But then Mercury stations retrograde, and there's some type of delay or some type of miscommunication or, not doing your inventory correctly where you have to change something about your money. Something about your money is changing. So it just looks like you're doing a lot of career changes to me, and it just seems like this is when the money part of it kind of catches up, in my opinion. So it doesn't really look that bad given everything else that's going on. Maybe you used to be a server and you made your money mostly through tips. Now this is a salary, and there's this. It's a weird this is a transitional phase with your money essentially. That starts on the 24th. Then after that, Mars enters Libra. This is really important because Mars is going to go into Libra and it's going to tee up everything that's going on for the winter. Mars is going into your 3rd house. Again, communication, technology, short distance travel, siblings, neighbors, how you do things, really. And so as Mars goes into Libra, the problem is Mars is fights and conflicts, and it's in detriment in Libra. Mars wants to be, combative. And in Libra, it's about having peace and balance. And so Mars doesn't do that well here. So it's going to feel like you have to do things for other people. It's going to feel like you're indecisive or you're complacent or that you can't confront the things that you want to. And it's in your third house. So there's going to be this kind of sense of going back and forth with people around you, maybe bickering with siblings, maybe, being complacent about how you utilize your time. This is your ninth house ruler of your beliefs, in detriment in your third house of like action. And I think this is the moment where you go, oh, the way I believe about myself isn't lining up with my results. And this is going to be a time of really shifting your actions, in my opinion. But it's going to come from a problem. Like you're like, oh, I'm realizing that I can't just do all of these things. And Mars and Libra might be hard to initiate or take action on all of this stuff. Like, the third house is how you do things. The south node's going through there, and this is going to initiate all of the changes you have to make in, how you spend your time, how you schedule your day, how you use the information that you have, if you're even using the knowledge that you have at all. So Mars enters Libra. That's going to kick off the fall and the winter, and we'll talk about it as we go on. Then we get to September, and this is when Venus stations direct. Now, again, Venus is stationing direct in your first house, but what's important here is this is happening on September 4th. Notice Jupiter stations retrograde on September 4th. So we have Venus stationing direct and Jupiter stationing retrograde. Weird combination of events going on here. Let's talk about it. So what are we at? September 4th? There we go. So what's interesting about this is Venus stations direct. She's morning star now, right? Venus and Leo, morning star is like, I am seeking this kind of attention. And I don't mean that in like a derogatory way. Like Venus and Leo wants to be seen, wants to be witnessed, wants to be glorified. But morning star is very ambitious about going after it, doing the things that are going to get that kind of attention. It will be squaring Jupiter, but then Jupiter stations retrograde, where Jupiter has been expanding your 10th house, creating all of these opportunities in your career, and it's giving you all of this hope and faith. But then when Jupiter goes retrograde, that faith runs out. And this is really where it comes down to the real deal. Like, life is really easy when Jupiter's direct, and then Jupiter goes retrograde and everyone stops believing in things. Jupiter retrograde is like, you have to have gratitude and faith for what you have. Like, you can't just be upset about what you don't have. Like, Jupiter retrograde is like, how do you create that good feeling of abundance internally? And this is going to be in your 10th house. There's going to be some issues with your work and your career probably that are going to start to move backwards, even though you are feeling like you're starting to move forward into a new thing. And so this is just going to be a period of reflection and learning and thinking higher and remaining hopeful and remaining grateful so those things can continue to come into your life later on down the road. But it's really interesting, Venus and Leo stations direct, and you're like, I'm ready, I'm moving on, this is how I feel, this is what I'm doing. And then Jupiter stations retrograde, where you start to really question all of that stuff. Then after that, 2 weeks later, Mercury stations direct in Virgo, and you get your money thing figured out. Like I said, it's just this transition with money that's going on here. So it's like, maybe you change jobs, or, maybe you start working for yourself. Once Mercury stations direct, you get the money thing figured out, and, finances are starting to get cleared up. Money will start to be a little bit better. It just takes some reorganizing, essentially. Then we get to October. This is where things start to get a little hardcore for a minute. Mars will conjoin the South Node in Libra. That happens on the 4th. Again, this is in your 3rd house. So communication, tech, short distance travel, how you utilize your knowledge. And the problem with this is Mars on K2. This is a drain. This is an exhaustion. This is a letting go, the moving on from something. The problem with this is Mars rules your 4th house of your home and your family. So this has to do with family stuff. But what's interesting is the North Node is in Aries. It's in Mars's sign, but Mars is in detriment in Libra on the South Node. So it's like, you can't go forward until you handle this. There's something you have to separate or cut yourself from, whether it's a roommate, a family member. And the Mars and Libra on the South Node is like, you're either going to have to go out of your way to do something for someone that you don't want to. Like, Mars and Libra is really good about doing things for other people, regardless of how you feel about it. Or you're going to have to throw off the balance with things, and you might have to, do something you may not want to do and cause a rift in a relationship you may not want to do. But that's really what's going on here. This is also, again, this is your 9th house of like your beliefs, and this is in your 3rd house of doing. This is like, you kind of have to make some changes here. You're not just going to keep doing what you've been doing and get different results. That's not how it works. this is really where I think you have that also that realization of the cognitive dissonance between your beliefs and your actions. And so this is going to feel really dumping. This is going to feel very draining and exhausting, and it's going to involve relationships too. And it's Venus in Leo. Venus is just about to leave shadow. So there's a big change there. And then a few days later on the 12th, Mars enters Scorpio. And then it activates your 4th house of your home, your family, your living situation, your parents. This is important because we have just had the South Node go through your 4th house. So the South Node went through your 4th house. There's this draining, this purge, this emptying with living situation stuff. That's all done, and now Mars gets to go into your 4th house. Mars rules fights and conflicts, and it's going to be in Scorpio, so they'll be intense. So this might bring up fights and conflicts with parents and, people within your living situation, or if you have like a landlord or something like that. But Mars is really going to be charging up your 4th house. Your 9th ruler of spirituality and expression is connected to your 4th house. So this might be getting more deeper into your spiritual work from home. And this is going to be a really good time to lean into that, right? Like Mars and Scorpio in the 4th, like get comfortable, get into a work position from home. The other thing here, actually, let's talk about this first. Then right after that, we have our first solar eclipse in Libra. This is happening on the 14th. Again, this is an eclipse in the 3rd house, and Mars has already teed you up for all of this. So Mars caused all of these problems, and then this eclipse is really there for you to empty it and drain it. What's interesting is this eclipse is right on the South Node, so it's like, hey, we're moving on. We're getting rid of this relationship. It's 3rd house of, people that are literally close to you. Again, how you utilize your time and your knowledge. But Venus, which rules this 3rd house, is in fall in the 2nd house. So Venus doesn't do well in Virgo, and she's in your 2nd house of money. So there's something about money involved or possessions involved that it's like, this isn't working anymore, and you kind of have to cut it out. And so this is a big drain, a big release when it comes to siblings, neighbors, communication, tech, maybe getting off social media or something like that. And it's something to do with money here. Venus is also opposite Saturn, so maybe you owe money, maybe you need to give back money, something along those lines. And it's going to be exhausting, but that's really the worst of it, because then we get into November. Saturn stations direct. 8th house, again, other people's money, death, debt, taxes. This is why I was like, maybe you pay off some bills or something like that. Because when Saturn stations direct, it's like all of this stuff that you were taking more discipline and maturity on when it came to 8th house. Maybe you have some bills, some debt you need to pay off. Saturn was retrograde, where it was like, okay, I got to pay off the bills. I got to do the thing I don't want to do. But then Saturn stations direct, and it's like, oh, like I am now an adult. I am now mature and financially and fiscally responsible. When Saturn stations direct, there's going to be this level of maturity that really comes in, where it's like, okay, you got all of this authority and responsibility that felt good. Then Saturn went retrograde. You kind of had to grow up into it. You had to grow into those shoes, and now those shoes finally fit. And now you feel like you can handle this area of your life responsibly. So other people's business, death, taxes, inheritance, other people's money, all of that's really coming to play here. Then right after that, we have a Mars Cazimi in Scorpio. This is actually going to be a pretty big one for you guys, because again, it's in your 4th house of literally your home and your living situation. And it's a Cazimi. This is a starting point. So typically with Mars's cycle around the sun is known as the hero's journey. And I've been making a joke of like, this is Mars Cazimis are like when the hero's journey starts, like that story refreshes itself. I'm considering this one the villain origin story. Mars, so let me actually bring this to your attention too. Before, this is November 5th here, and the Mars Cazimi is on the 17th. Before that happens, Mars is going to make this opposition to Jupiter, and then it's going to also make this opposition to Uranus. So there's going to be all of these turbulent things that go on in the home related to your work and your career. It's going to be really back and forth and up and down. But then things really reset in your home on the 17th. This is like a fresh start. A planet that is conjoining the sun is like sick or dying. And then when it's Cazimi, it's like moving on to something else. It's moving into new territory. And so this would be a great time to move. Like this is like getting a new place, resetting things with your living situation. Some of you might even be moving to a different country. 9th ruler going Cazimi in the 4th. But this is a clearing out point. But again, this is kind of like what I'd like to say your villain origin story. Something to do with family, living situation, stuff like that. Then right after that, Mars enters Sagittarius. This seems pretty fun because it's going into your 5th house of sex, passion, creativity, arts, children, recreation. The only stipulation is when Mars enters Sagittarius, it's going to immediately square Saturn. So Mars is, again, energy, drive, action. It's in Sagittarius, so it's like expanding, doing a bunch of fun and liberating stuff. But it's in your fifth house of sex, love, romance, self-expression, art, music, creativity. But it's squaring Saturn. Something's not working here. Like Mars in Sagittarius is like pulling the trigger too fast, and it's squaring Saturn in Pisces. You know, this is a really weird time for relationships for you guys in sex, because like Saturn's in the 8th house, so you're kind of looking at relationships in a new light, and Mars going into Sag squaring Saturn is like there's something about what you're doing when it comes to the fun and the romance that's not really clicking with the you being serious and you taking life more seriously. Like Mars in Sag is really fun, but Saturn in Pisces is trying to navigate like, how do I have fun but also be a responsible adult and be mature about this? You're going to come into conflict here where things will be really fun, but also it's going to call into question your boundaries, I think, with relationships. Then right after that, we get to December, and we really close out the year with two things, and that's Mercury stationing retrograde in Capricorn. Again, this is the 6th house. What's funny about this Mercury retrograde is, let me show you. This is like a whole month later. This is on the 13th. Mercury is going to station retrograde at the same degree it stationed direct at last year. My bad, not last year, earlier this year. So Mercury stationed direct at 8 degrees Capricorn in January of 2023, but then in December of 2023, it stations retrograde at 8 degrees Capricorn. So there's something about whatever was going on with work, coworkers, health, pets, your schedule, and money, you're going to come back to here in December. It's going to be literally like the same thing. It's like Groundhog Day almost. So expect that. So pay attention to January because that's going to be important in December. And then after that, the only thing that we have to look forward to is Jupiter stationing direct. This happens right before New Year's Eve. And again, Jupiter's been retrograde, so you've been questioning your faith, questioning everything that you're doing. But by the time Jupiter stations direct, it's like all of that hope and faith gets restored, and you finally get to start to expand more of your work. Because Jupiter's not done in your 10th house. It's going to continue to fly through your 10th house for the beginning part of 2024. So it's like Jupiter goes retrograde and you're going to question all of the things that you took on. But then by the time we get to pretty much New Year's Eve, you're going to be like, all right, sweet. I have the Jupiter, Mercury will go retrograde. So there'll be a change in your work and your schedule. And then Jupiter will station direct. And it's like, all right, it's time to move forward. It's time to expand in my work and my career. And that's 2023 for the Leo risings. I think it's honestly, I literally say this from the bottom of my heart. This year's way better for you guys than literally any other sign, at least that I can think of at this moment. So enjoy it. For what it is. Make sure you like this video so you can come back to it throughout the year. Let me know what you're most excited for in the comments below. If you want to know more about how this year is specifically going to be affecting you, go ahead and book a consultation with me on my website, camwhiteastro.com. And thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate you, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.